Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Snyder, president of Case Western Reserve University, and it is my great privilege to welcome all of you to the 2011 Lewis Stokes Leadership Symposium. This event dates back to November 2001, when the Honorable John Lewis of Georgia spoke about how political action can build, and I quote, that beloved community. In the decades since, we have heard from leaders including John Conyers, Melvin Watt, and Maxine Waters. Each one of these individuals offered a unique perspective about the role of a public servant in advancing civic society. In all of those instances, we have benefited from the speaker's experience, insight, and example. In addition, members of the community also have had an opportunity to hear speakers firsthand, not just on television. And we are delighted that we have some young people here to share this event with us, from Beechwood High School, from Heights High, I think they're coming actually, they're not here yet, from Glenville High School, from John Hay High School, from Orange High School, and from Shaw High School. So thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you find the presentation this afternoon equal parts both inspiring and educational, and I think we'll deliver on that. I would also like to think that our speakers will not be the only ones to have an effect on our audience, and especially our young audience. We are Case Western Reserve University, and we were recently ranked 7th in the nation among colleges that contribute to the common good. Yes, that's a great thing. That list is compiled by Washington Monthly Magazine and looks at measures that you might expect, like research funding and faculty achievements, but it also considers the amount of volunteer service that our students do while they're with us, and then the paths that they take after graduation. This year, for example, the magazine cited the significant number of our graduates who participate in the Peace Corps. We are very proud of our students and pleased that their efforts have drawn such positive recognition. Even more important than that recognition, though, is the lesson that they learn from direct involvement in our community. Whether it's dental students providing sealants to thousands of Cleveland school children, or our medical and nursing students establishing a student-run clinic, free clinic, or our undergraduate students who volunteer at more than 90 different organizations throughout this community, our young people invariably tell us that they gain as much from their engagement as they help. This is a testament to their character as well as to the strength and resilience of the residents of Greater Cleveland. No one knows more about Northeast Ohio's strengths than the person who represents Case Western Reserve University in Congress, the Honorable Marcia Fudge. Since Congresswoman Fudge joined the House in 2008, she has made healthcare and education among her signature issues. With regard to the former, she feels a passionate commitment to helping reduce childhood obesity. And I am really proud to tell you that she has been a champion for the work of Case Western Reserve University, and in particular, our research on critical healthcare needs for this region. We are delighted always to welcome her to our campus, and this is no exception. Please welcome Congresswoman Marcia Fudge.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. I want to say a special hello and welcome to my colleague, the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Chairman Cleaver, and to my friend and mentor and someone who represented this district for 30-plus years, Congressman Lewis Stokes. It is always a pleasure to be here with you. And I know that this is going to be an outstanding event because you have outstanding presenters. And so, you know, buckle up, because Chairman Cleaver is going to take it to you. Trust me when I tell you. I want to thank Letitia as well, who makes sure that we all get where we're supposed to be and makes these programs run smoothly. Thank you. All of us know, as I look at these young people, how important technology is in our lives. I know none of us want to do without technology. So although sometimes I want to take my BlackBerry and throw it in the lake, I want to stop the emails and stop the everything else I get, you know. But we did this one time through a teleconference. Face-to-face is something that we have lost sight of in this country. Face-to-face interaction, socialization is important, especially as you start to mature and think about what you want to do as a career. It's very, very important. So I want you to understand why it's going to be important when they start to take questions that you ask them, that you start to verbalize what it is you are thinking. Now, I know that you think that we're all up here and everything we have to talk about is history and it doesn't relate to you in any way. Don't you? Yeah, okay. You can be nice. Be nice. Okay, it's all right. But a lot of the things we did are happening again today. We might not be marching for segregation or segregated schools today, but Occupy Wall Street is out there. It's the same thing. They are fighting for what is right. There's going to come a time in each one of your lives that you're going to have to determine what is important to you, not just to you, but what it is you're going to do to make the life of somebody else better. I don't care how important you get, how much money you make. These guys have met with the most important people and influential people in this country and others. But they have taken the time to come here today because they know that in front of me sits our future. They understand that it's important to give you the kinds of things to think about that will make you what we hope will be someone who does something to make this world a better place. No matter your endeavor in life, I want you all to be millionaires, billionaires. I want you to be whatever it is you want to be. But whatever that is, take the time to make a difference in somebody else's life. I want to thank the university for allowing me to just say a few words to you, and to again express to you that Chairman Cleaver is tough. So whatever question you ask him, he can take it. He's going to be honest. He's going to give you some wisdom. And he's going to, I hope, leave an impression on you like he has left an impression on me. He is my leader in Congress. He is one of the most well-respected people in the U.S. House of Representatives on both sides of the aisle. So take advantage of him being with you today, and I thank you all so much. And again, thank you, Dr. Snyder, for having me.
Thank you, Congresswoman Fudge, not just for those remarks, but also for the great leadership that you provide to our district and for the way you continue to be a champion for education at all levels. We think it matters, and we know that you're doing the work that helps make this world a better place. Now let me turn to the individual for whom this event is named, the Honorable Louis Stokes. The 11th District was his for 3 decades, and he remains deeply dedicated to its residents to this very day. I am proud to tell you that he is a graduate of Case Western Reserve University and also serves as a member of the faculty of the Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences. He remains very connected in Cleveland, serving as an advisor to many, many organizations and leaders in town, including an advisor to Case Western Reserve University and, in fact, to me. We are honored that this event bears his name and are so grateful for his ongoing engagement with our university and with this community. It is my privilege to introduce to you the Honorable Louis Stokes.
Thank you very much, President Snyder. To our distinguished keynote speaker, to Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, to Dean Cleve Gilmore, Dr. Mobley, and others, let me firstly just make a couple of acknowledgments. Firstly, I want to thank President Snyder not only for your very warm and generous words of introduction, but I want to thank you for the privilege and honor I have of being a member of the faculty of the Mandel School at this university. I also want to thank you for appointing me to serve on your visiting committee. But in general, you have brought such great leadership to this university. We've gotten accustomed now to picking up the front page of the Plain Dealer and reading about some new $50 million grant that you've brought to this university. But you have given this school a new direction. and you've given all of us who are part of it new direction. I just want to thank you for the great leadership you're giving us. Let's give her a great big hand. Thank you. Thank you. Dean Cleve Gilmore, I want to thank you and all of the Mandel School faculty for the pleasure and privilege I have of serving with all of you. It's been a great and wonderful experience for me, and just to be a part of the faculty of the Mandel School, which is now one of the 10 top social work schools in the nation and the top social work school in our state. Thank you for the privilege of serving with you. Thank you. Thank you. And it is really with great pride that I acknowledge Congresswoman Marcia Fudge. I can tell you, having served in the 11th Congressional District for the years that I served, and then to be able to see the kind of leadership that she has now brought to the 11th Congressional District. As Congressman Cleaver and I were driving out this morning, I mentioned to him that she had told me that the two of them have developed a very close personal friendship there in the Congress. And in return, he said to me, he said, not only is that true that we're very close friends, he said, but she has built up such enormous respect throughout the Congress. And I know it's true because everyone that I talk to about her there talk about how hardworking she is and how she does her homework and what a very thoughtful and intelligent person she is. And so that makes me proud. And I know it makes you proud because she's representing us in the United States Congress. Let's give our Congresswoman a great big hand. Thank you. This year, the Congressional Black Caucus is celebrating its 40th anniversary. I had the honor of being one of the 14 men and women who were the founders of this organization 40 years ago. In 1971, 1972, I served as the second chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus. In the 112th Congress, Emanuel Cleaver was elected as the 20th chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus. He comes to us today not only as chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, but as a very distinguished member of Congress. Over the past 12 years, this leadership forum has been proud to bring you other distinguished members of the Congressional Black Caucus, such as John Conyers, Charlie Rangel, John Lewis, Mel Watt, Maxine Waters, and last year, Barbara Lee. Chairman Emanuel Cleaver II is now serving his 4th term representing Missouri's 5th Congressional District, the home district of President Harry Truman. Before coming to Congress, he served for 12 years on the City Council of Missouri's largest municipality, Kansas City. Cleaver was elected as the city's first African-American mayor in 1991. During his 8-year stint in the office of the mayor, Cleaver distinguished himself as an economic development activist and an unapologetic redevelopment craftsman. He and the City Council brought a number of major corporations to the city, including Transamerica, Harley-Davidson, and Citicorp. Cleaver also led the effort after a 40-year delay to build the South Midtown Roadway. Upon completion of the major thoroughfare, he proposed a new name, the Bruce R. Watkins Roadway. Bruce was, for the benefit of many of you, a great civil rights leader in that city and someone who was revered and respected throughout the nation for his great work. Additionally, his municipal stewardship includes the 18th and Vine redevelopment, a new American Royal, the establishment of a family division of the municipal court, and the reconstruction and beautification of Brush Creek. Chairman Cleaver has received 5 honorary doctoral degrees, augmented by a bachelor's degree from Prairie View A&M of the University of Texas, and a master's degree from St. Paul Theology of Kansas City. In addition to all of these other things, he is a very noted and revered minister. In 2009, Chairman Cleaver, with a multitude of accomplishments, both locally and congressionally, introduced the most ambitious project of his political career, the creation of a green impact zone. This zone, consisting of 150 blocks of declining urban core, has received approximately $125 million in American Recovery and Reinvestment funds. The Green Impact Zone is aimed at making this high-crime area the environmentally greenest piece of urban geography in the world. This project includes rebuilding Troost Avenue, rehabbing bridges, curbs, and sidewalks, home weatherization, smart grid technology in hundreds of homes, and most importantly, hundreds of badly needed jobs for Green Zone residents. I am proud this afternoon to present to Case Western Reserve University a national leader, my friend, Chairman Emanuel Cleaver II.
President Snyder, and to, of course, Louis Stokes. It's somewhat intimidating to stand immediately behind the podium when Congressman Stokes has just spoken. You know, when I was in Kansas City, just becoming familiar with politics and becoming familiar with the Congressional Black Caucus, and in the early days, when there were only 14 or so, most African Americans around the country could name all of them, because it was such an impactful organization. You know, you could just call out a name and people could tell you where they were from. And in those early days, Johnson Publication did many stories on the members of the Congressional Black Caucus, and so they were heroes, and they were distinguished and dignified, and I never thought that I would have the opportunity to stand behind a podium after Louis Stokes. And I'm glad that I did not. It probably would have contributed to some arrogance if in the early days I thought, one of these days I'm going to actually be on the same stage with Louis Stokes. I'm somebody special. So it is indeed a thrill to be with him. And of course, having been elected the first African American mayor in our state, every African American who was elected mayor in this country during the 80s and 90s were doing so with an eye on the election and the record of Mayor Carl Stokes. And he kind of was the igniter, if you will, to the ambition of African Americans to become mayors of the largest cities in the country. And so I'm honored to be with you and to be here at Case Western and to sit by Marcia Fudge, and she is, of course, one of my closest friends and somebody I love dearly. And Sometimes she even loves me. Sometimes, but we struck a friendship early on when she arrived, and we have been fast friends since, and I appreciate it truly. I'm into sustainability, so I apologize. These are what I use when I have my shirts cleaned. These are what they use at the cleaners to keep my shirt straight. So this come out of the cleaner's bag, and so so people laugh at me, as you just did. However, there's no point in throwing these away. I mean, they write well. And the other thing is, don't be frightened. The speech is not long, in spite of the fact that I have a lot of these shirt cards. The reason is that I write large, but there's even a more practical reason. I'm an ordained United Methodist pastor. I pastored a church, one of our largest churches in the state, and I come from a family of ministers. I never wanted to be a minister because every minister I knew in my family was broke. From my grandfather was extremely broke, and then his son, my grandpa, and my uncles. I mean, nobody had any money. There's actually no reason to want to voluntarily become poor. Or just think about it, you get ordained to be poor. So, but I did. I went into the ministry without any hopes of doing so. My plan was to play professional football, and a lot of things happened along the way in terms of injuries and 13 operations, but I probably wouldn't have made it even had I not had those operations. But I learned a lot growing up in the churches where my great-grandpa, who lived to be 103, pastored until he was 96. And then his son, my grandfather, and then my father's oldest brother. There are 27 Cleaver preachers. And my son just completed his doctorate and is pastoring Emanuel Cleaver III. And growing up in these churches, I learned so much about public speaking. And one of the things I learned is brevity. And I received many lessons over the years. My great-grandpa preached with a cane, and all of the great-grandchildren had to sit on the front pew, and in cane reaching distance. And so we all understood. I mean, you do not go to sleep. I mean, you do not bat your eyes. I mean, if you get sleepy, you sit there and do this. And so having learned a lot, I know that people will even pretend that they want you to speak longer. But I don't ever fall for it. I've been around a long time. I was invited to come to the place I was born after I had served as mayor of Kansas City for a couple of years, to a place called Waxahachie, Texas, where I was born. And I was speaking in a church, a primitive Baptist church. And this little church was packed. People were outside, and they had little stools outside where people could sit, and the speaker system was outside, and the newspaper there had written a front page story They had named two streets, two intersecting streets, one Emanuel Street and Cleaver Boulevard. They intersected. And so I'm coming home where I was born, and people turned out in huge numbers. And so after I was introduced to speak, my grandmother sitting on the front pew, I, didn't have any notes at all. And the reason was, I'd been to seminary. I had a master's degree in theology. I could quote Barth and Tillich and Kierkegaard and Bonhoeffer. I could talk about eschatology, epistemology. And plus I had been on Oprah, and so why would I need to have notes? So I stood up and looked at this packed church with no notes. And I said, it's good to be here with you. What would you like for me to speak about today? And a lady in the back stood up. She was my first Sunday school teacher. And she stood up in the back with a little white handkerchief, which you will see in black churches with the older women in particular. And she said, Cleaver, I'd like for you to speak about 5 minutes. I don't think that's funny. But I have learned, and so I will be very, very careful here. But I do need to say to you that there is a cold wind blowing across America. A cold wind that has changed the fabric of this nation. And as this wind blows, it leaves in the aftermath devastation, the likes of which most of us have not seen in our lifetime. The top 10% of this country possess 80% of all financial assets. 10%. The bottom 90% holds 93% of the nation's debt. We have a consumption-based economy, but consumption cannot occur if the consumers don't have jobs. And right now, unemployment is above 9%. And for African Americans and Latinos, it is just under depression levels. To play it out in another way, the average worth of a white family in the United States is $122,000. The average wealth for an African American family, according to the Pew Research Group, is $5,677. That is a reality because African American wealth has historically been connected with home ownership. And when you have 3 million foreclosures, a disproportionate percentage belonging to African Americans and Latinos, it means that wealth begins to vanish. We are headed toward spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.3 trillion for a war or 2 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Why do I mention that? And that is because that is eating up a great portion of our annual budget. The third leading expenditure in the U.S. budget is the interest on the debt. And we chose to borrow money to fight the wars. In fact, you were born at a time when this nation made history. We are the first nation in the history of the planet to go to war and then do a tax decrease. Nations don't go to war and then tell the public, we're going to reduce your taxes, because that means that the war is not paid for. Ah, I see the people who are going to pay for it. I see them sitting in here. You and unborn generations will pay for what we have done. And the problem we have is that we have many problems. And those problems are going to be difficult to solve because we are a nation with a government that is no longer able to solve the knotty problems affecting the public. Why? It is because we are now a nation with a political system designed to fight itself. We have until November 23rd for a super committee to come back to the full Congress and present a deal that will would cut over the next 10 years $1.2 trillion. Well, unless something happened during lunchtime today, that committee is not even close to coming up with a deal. Now, many of you may not want to pay any attention to what's going on. You need to. Let me tell you, my father, I was talking to him on the phone night before last, and he reminded me of my early days when I was in the 9th grade. We were living in public housing. I came out of public housing. The projects. He reminded me that I came in one night as he was sitting on the sofa smoking Viceroys. I don't even know if they make them anymore, but I said, Daddy, would you start taking the newspaper? Because I was a voracious reader. I had to read the newspaper every day. I used to get up in the mornings and go next door, read their newspaper before they got out of the yard and lay it on the porch. And my father said, son, we can't afford to take the newspaper because it will cost $1.90 a month. And my father was at the same time sending my mother to college with 4 children at home going to high school. And as he told me that we could not take the newspaper, he was about to take a draw on his Viceroy. And I will never forget it if God allows me to live 1,000 years. My father started crying. He got up, went to the bathroom, poured his cigarettes into the toilet, and flushed them. My dad had been smoking since he was 14. His fingernails were yellow from the nicotine. He never took a shot. He never wore a patch. He never went to a hypnotic session. He stopped smoking right there on the spot. And then he started taking the newspaper, and I read it every single day. And I knew what was going on in the world. The teachers thought I was exceptional. I was not. I was just well-read. And that put me ahead of everybody else. And one of the things I hope you understand is that if you're not keeping up with what's going on, you're going to walk into a future blindly. And what's going on today will have an inextricable connection to you and your families in the years to come. And right now, with the recession that began in 2001, we are a Congress that does little more than fight. Nothing much gets accomplished in Congress. I was telling somebody the other day, right after I was elected, I was thrilled. I got to Washington. I was sworn in. I mean, man, I'm excited. I'm a member of the United States Congress. I mean, representing a district in Missouri, Harry Truman's seat. And I never will forget, I went to my first official hearing, and I sat there listening to all of the vitriol at my committee hearing. And I remember thinking as I was sitting there, this is not a committee hearing room. This is hell with chandelier lighting. Because we were having what I have termed, and we continue to have, fact-free debates. The facts become irrelevant. And ideology trumps logic. And because we are a body of ideologues, it means that there is no grounds on which we can discuss one of the weighty issues involving the future of our nation. My children make fun of me, led by their mother, because I am obsessed with animals. I have animal books. I look at the Animal Planet. I look at anything and read anything about animals, particularly the cats. If I am an expert on anything, it's on cats. I can talk about cats all day. I'm talking about the big cats, and I never will forget watching a special on the Discovery Channel on bees. And I learned something that I thought was applicable to Congress. Somehow, I don't know how these producers and directors do this. They're able to get a camera into the beehives. I mean, this is amazing. And you see these bees doing all of these things, and it looks like they are, extremely intelligent creatures. I mean, they work, and then they rest. But the one thing I came away with on this special about bees is that the bees cannot sting and make honey at the same time. They have to make a choice. Either they're going to make honey or they sting. And the only way they make honey is by working together. It is a well-oiled machine where the bees make honey. One of the problems we have in Washington is that Congress has become a body of stingers. Consequently, there is no honey, no legislation benefiting the people of the country. No honey is coming from Washington. No honey is coming from Washington. And so with the great issues facing us, we are not able to talk with each other. And I think there are a number of reasons for it. One is I am convinced that members coming home every week is a factor. I went to the historian. I was so frustrated. I went to the historian, and in fact, I've spent 2 afternoons with him since my election more than 4 years ago, and asked if he could help me identify or pinpoint when things went bad. And without a second, he said 1994. He said it was 1994, just right off the bat. And I said, Dr. Rostov, what was it? He said, I can tell you clearly. Newt Gingrich came in and was brilliant. He said, how do we take control of Congress? Now keep in mind, the Democrats had controlled Congress for 34, 40 years. And so Newt Gingrich, who I still believe to be brilliant, there's some other adjectives that I would add, but I think the man is brilliant. And he came up with something that was amazing. He said to the people who were running against incumbents, he said, I want you to go on television and in debates and say and use this phrase, don't send him or don't send her back to Congress because they suffer from Potomac fever. They don't come home. They stay in Washington. And so they are not in tune with what's going on here in this district. And so what did members start doing? Coming home every week. Prior to that, during the time when Congressman Stokes was first elected, when members were elected, their families went to Washington. They bought homes, they knew each other, they played golf together on the weekends, the kids played Little League sports, and the parents knew each other. It is infinitely easier to be nasty to somebody you don't know. And if you know their children, it's even more difficult to be nasty to them. And so members of Congress come home every single weekend now. Hardly anybody lives in Washington. And as a result, we don't know each other. The only time we see each other is in contentious situations. We're either in a committee hearing or we're on the floor. Now let me tell you about what you can do when you don't know people. My wife and I are down in the Bahamas, and the second day, she says, let's go down to the beach. I go to my bag, boom, I have no swimming trunks. And I said, oh no, I said, well, I'll just kind of read while you go down. And she goes over and she takes a pair of my very colorful underwear, and she says, you can wear them, nobody will know the difference. Now, do you think I would, wear those to church? I mean, go to church on Sunday morning, wear my underwear? No. But I did it that day because I felt two things. Number one, she was right, nobody would notice the difference. And number two, I didn't know those people. I'd never see those people again in my life. I didn't care what they thought about me. And that's what happens when you have no familiarity with the people you're around. And that's one of the things that is happening in Congress. And number two, we have this 24-hour news cycle, and we have so many stations that what people do is watch the TV stations that will help them justify their prejudices. And so the TV station is telling them what they believe. And rather than looking at other sources, that is the source. They just embrace everything they see. And so as a result, we have now a mean-spirited nation. People who are mean. I listened day before yesterday to a phone call that had come into our office and had been recorded. And the N word was used, I mean, just every other sentence, screaming and shouting insults. And the TV and the radio, acid radio, I call it, perpetuates this. And the people can get folk to start calling and hanging up and cursing out members of Congress. They'll tell them, you call Congress, or you call the Congressional Black Caucus office, and you let them know that you don't like this. And many of them will do it and do it in a very nasty way. And what I hope people can understand is that we are at a very delicate moment where things that would have been condemned 25 years ago are freely accepted today. Now, if you look at the way things are functioning, you can understand why people, through polls, will say that Congress only has an 11% approval rating. Now, of course, I would like to see the 11%. I'd like to find and sit down and talk with those people who have a positive view of Congress. I think they are sick, they're on drugs, they don't pay attention, something is not right. But I give the public a 2.5% approval rating. Let me tell you why. The House of Representatives, one of the reasons I'm so proud of being elected, is the only body in the country that you must be elected to. The mayor of Cleveland does not have to be elected. He or she can be appointed. The governor can be appointed. The president of the United States, and we've had it in our lifetime, can move from the vice presidency to the presidency. The only office in the country to which you must be elected is the House. You can even be appointed to the Senate. To the House of Representatives, you must be elected. If I die today, nobody will fill my seat. There will be a special election. And so everybody who's in Congress was elected. Nobody had a coup d'etat. We were all elected. And the public, 2.5% approval rating that I give them, send everybody there. And the worst part, when you watch a candidate, and elections are coming up, and you will prove, you will say to yourselves, Cleaver was right. You will say to yourselves, Cleaver was right. You watch the TV ads for politicians and see how vicious they are. And so when a candidate runs a thermonuclear campaign and is elected, what in the world makes you think that he or she will go to Washington and get along with everybody? That they will change, some kind of metamorphosis takes place, and they come to Congress and now they're civil. It won't happen. If they run a nasty campaign, the chances are extremely high they will be in Congress as a nasty member of Congress. And everybody says, We don't like those campaigns, but you look at the ad and you make decisions based on what you see. And if we have a raucous and pathologically partisan public, we should understand that they will never become civil as long as they have no model but themselves. Now, 2 nights ago, the Republicans had a debate. And people screamed at each other and put their hands on each other. As a person who grew up in public housing, Mitt Romney committed the cardinal sin. I'm telling you. Man, don't you put your hands on me. Now, black people. Now, you know I know what I'm talking about now. I mean, when I saw that, I stepped back myself. At home, I thought, this is a problem here. But if you think about it, people are screaming at each other. The moderator couldn't get them to stop. There's not a parent in this room or in Cleveland who would have said to their children, I want you to sit down with me and watch this so you can learn all of the skills of debating. And there is not a single parent who would ask their child or their children, or a teacher would say to students, watch C-SPAN so you can learn how to debate. And that ought to make all of us ashamed. This is a sad moment in our nation. A cold wind is blowing across America. We can have no compromise in Congress because people have come to Washington under the belief that whatever they believe is right. So here's the way this logic goes. I'm right and you're evil. Now, how is compromise going to occur? People are saying, I will never compromise with evil. And then, look, I have a master's degree in theology. I know a little bit about it. I listen to people in Congress saying that God sent them to Congress. No, I'm serious. God didn't send me. God didn't send me to Congress. If God sent you to Congress, it means you are infallible. And so therefore, any issue you touch has been baptized and is pure. And anybody with the opposing position is satanic. And so compromise now is viewed as capitulation. Democracy demands compromise. Now, I hear people say there's too much partisanship. I disagree. I'm partisan. We need partisanship. We need it. If both parties think alike, one party is unnecessary. Democracy was built on the fact that opposing views would come together and that the best of both would be used to make better legislation. But that's not what happens today. Compromise is the art of cutting the pie so that everybody believes they had the largest piece. But that's not happening. Here's what happens. 2 little boys, and I'm wrapping it up. Two little boys decide to go play at the park. So they get to the park, and one little boy says, I want a seesaw. let's play on the seesaw. And the other boy said, no, I want to play catch. So one little boy sits on one end of the seesaw, but of course he can't rise because nobody's on the other end. The other boy throws the ball, nobody throws it back because there's nobody to throw it back. And so one little boy sits frustrated on the seesaw, one little boy holds his glove and no ball, looking at it down a piece, and nothing happens. And both kids go home frustrated. It would have been easy to say, okay, let's seesaw for 30 minutes, and then after that, let's play catch. But that's not what happens in Washington. It does not happen. And therefore, we are spending a great deal of time naming post offices. This is serious business. We don't name these post offices, the Russians will take over. And so the official religion of Washington is Confucianism, because there is no light on the issues that are important to the people of this country. Do you realize that with 9% unemployment, there has never been in the House of Representatives a hearing on a jobs bill? In the United States of America, not one hearing. And the chances are almost 1,000 to 1 that by the 23rd of November, we will not have a solution, which means that we will then have $600 billion cut from defense and $600 billion cut from domestic spending. You can sit here and think that has no relationship to you. That means Pell Grants gets cut. That means the VA hospital gets cut in the middle of a war. It means that FEMA gets cut. And the money that we need to fight against natural disasters is cut. And so these are some difficult times, and we need you, and of course we need to also be better examples so that the next generation can do it better. The greatest thing we can bequeath to the next generation of politicians is a picture of democratic civility. Now, people will ask me all the time about how can I stay there. I generally quit my congressional office 4 times a day. Now, I've only quit once today, but I generally quit 4 times a day. And I quit because I'll see, these fact-free debates, and where people are saying things that don't make sense. I mean, we're having a debate on, some secondary education bill, and somebody else is talking about abortion. No, I know I'm not making this up. I know you think I am. I'm not. And so it reminds me of these. I'm through when I tell you this. This is a true story. There were 2 flies, and this is a true story. 2 flies found some bologna on the handle of a knife and took their fill. And they ate so much that when they tried to fly, they were too full. And so they fell to the floor of the kitchen with a thud. And that's the end of the story. So I just wanted to share it with you. But there is a moral to the story. And it is this: don't fly off the handle when you're full of baloney.
Thank you very much, Chairman Cleaver, for both stories and morals. At this point, the plan is to have a couple of the distinguished members of our faculty come up and comment and add. This is a very tough act to follow. I'm sure glad it's you guys, not me. I am Joe White, Chair of the Political Science Department, and I'd like to bring up Professor Mark Chupp and Professor Rhonda Williams. And each of them is going to try to ring their own changes on the theme, and it's maybe a little challenging. Mark Chupp is assistant professor at the Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences. He teaches community development and directs the East Cleveland Community Partnership, a multi-institutional initiative to support the revitalization of East Cleveland. His research and practice interests include community building, the transformation of intergroup conflict, especially across identity groups, and citizen participation in democratic decision-making and public deliberation. His research focuses on social capital formation, neighborhood race relations, and intergroup conflict transformation. He currently directs an action research project in East Cleveland with Case Western Reserve University's Social Justice Alliance that includes oral histories, appreciative dialogue, and community visioning. It sounds like you have some people that could use your services over there in DC. So Mark, some remarks, please.
Thank you for your inspiring, humorous, and challenging words, Congressman. And I want to say at the outset that you talked about brevity, and so we agreed to be brief so that you can have some chances to interact with our distinguished guest as well. I also want to say I don't bring dry cleaner cardboard, but I do bring a sustainable water bottle. So I encourage others to do the same. So I want to talk a little bit about community leadership and the counterpart to our elected officials and their leadership. And I think that a strong democracy requires both strong community participation and citizenry and a strong government. And in fact, good government is often, if not always, the product of an educated and engaged citizenry. And at the same time, good government has the responsibility to encourage and facilitate an empowered citizenry. It's a two-way process. And so I think one of the first things that I would say with respect to the presentation today is that we need to restore the role of the citizen from that of a consumer. And there's a very different message when we talk about citizens versus consumers. The challenges we face in this cold wind that's blowing across the country require systemic change. There's no more evidence of that than in looking right here in Cleveland at the impact place has on well-being. If you don't know this statistic, it's alarming. Someone born in the Huff neighborhood today has a life expectancy of 64 years, while less than 10 miles away, a little over 8 miles away in Lyndhurst, the life expectancy of someone born today is 88.5 years. How can it be that by the mere virtue of where you were born, your life expectancy is almost 25 years less? That's a cold wind. This is a great disparity, and it's the greatest disparity in any city in the United States where this analysis has been done. There are no easy fixes to these problems. Decades of restructuring have led us to this place. Some are describing the events happening in Washington about debt reduction as class warfare, when in fact those in power and with privilege have for the last number of decades engaged in a process of systematically redefining our economy and the role of class. As we know, African American unemployment is much higher than the general population, 16% officially, but closer to 30% if we look at overall, not just those who are currently on the rolls. We do not have a lack of resources in this country, but an unfair distribution of them. And in 1980, the average for-profit CEO made 42 times that of the average worker. By 1990, that number had jumped to 100 times that of the average worker. And today, the average CEO of this country makes 475 times that of the average worker in the US. Only in this country does that exist. Canada and European countries, the ratio is less than 25 to 1. The 1% control almost a quarter of all the income in this country. Not wealth, income. And as a country, we represent 5% of the world's population, but consume almost 25% of the world's resources and energy. These disparities are unacceptable and deprive people across the world basic necessities and in our own communities. Are not these dramatic changes the result of decades of class warfare? Systemic change, which is needed today, requires a long-term commitment, and sustaining community participation requires intentional work at building strong leadership and strong community organization. Effective community leadership is a paradox in some ways. On the one hand, strong community leaders must be willing to take a stand when others are not, to have the courage to be a lone voice if necessary. But on the other hand, effective leaders must work together in community, working collaboratively to identify and work toward winning strategies. It takes both individual courage and community collaboration. Facing the challenges of today requires building on what we've learned from past leaders like Congressman Stokes, like Reverend Shuttlesworth, who just passed, who courageously fought for civil rights their entire life. Strong leaders do not accept the status quo as good enough. They buck conventional wisdom, and they defy the odds. Strong leaders bring a vision of a new way of being community based on social and economic justice, as well as right relationships. Here in Cleveland, in terms of sustainability, we have the Green City Blue Lake efforts that represent this kind of community leadership and effective public leadership, where Mayor Jackson has partnered with community visionaries like David Beach and others to create an initiative to make this the most sustainable city in the country. Next to Kansas City, maybe. Strong leaders also are willing to take risk, even when the stakes are high. And strong leaders span boundaries, engaging all stakeholders in a whole system process. And that requires really not this demonizing of the other, but actually accepting the other as a member of the community, even if you are diametrically opposed on the issues. It's a radical acceptance that says we must all be in the same room working together. Strong leaders work tirelessly to pursue their passion, humbly giving all for the cause without the need for recognition or glory. So, the next generation of these community leaders exist, and they're working hard in Cleveland and East Cleveland, across the country. They're in the room today. Many of you are here. There might be student leaders, they might be urban farmers, reimagining our Cleveland landscape, community organizing, and young elected officials like Mayor Gary Norton from East Cleveland. But we also must recognize that today's challenges require new approaches. And we cannot impose how we have always done things on these new initiatives. We received a call last night from someone with our own Occupy Cleveland. And the challenge they face is trying to be a participatory democracy in a new way, of working toward consensus. And that's not an easy process, but they are working at that. So we must recognize that groups like this are organized, even if they don't follow our conventions of what it means to be organized. Recognize that a small group of informally organized protest is shifting the narrative in public discourse, while the Occupy Washington, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Cleveland might disappear when the snow flies, they've already changed the public discourse and shifted the narrative in this country to begin to talk more candidly about the disparities of wealth and the concentration of wealth. That is a success in itself, and that shows leadership. So finally, I just want to say that for many of us, we need to step back and support these new emerging leaders, offering to learn and work together as they forge new ways. At the Mandel School, we promote engaged students who are out in the communities and with the knowledge, skills, and values to become change agents. In East Cleveland Partnership, we bring University Circle institutions together with community leaders to listen, to support them, and to connect them to other resources and opportunities, but not to impose our vision of how they should run their community, but to support their vision and goals. And finally, a word about who becomes leaders. They're not the anointed ones that somehow have been chosen and preordained, but they rise up out of their own passion. I count it myself such a privilege to be here today. Neither of my parents graduated high school. I never imagined that I would be a faculty member teaching at one of the best universities in the United States, at one of the best schools of social work in the country. But if you follow your passion and you follow your commitment, you'll never know where that takes you. So believe in yourself, believe in your passion, and you will become the leaders of the future. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Professor Chupp. I take three clear messages from that. One is strength doesn't mean extremism. A second thing is independence doesn't mean screaming in a pack. And the third is perhaps we will have to start changing Washington from outside Washington. I'm really glad to welcome also Professor Dr. Rhonda Y. Williams, who is Associate Professor of History in the College of Arts and Sciences at our university, who completed her PhD at the University of Pennsylvania under the stewardship of Dr. Mary Frances Berry, and is the founding director of CWIU's Social Justice Institute. She is also the founder and director of our postdoctoral fellowship in African American Studies and the author of an award-winning book, The Politics of Public Housing: Black Women's Struggles Against Urban Inequality. Professor Williams.
So I know we're getting short on time, and we want to have some room for question and answers, and this is always sometimes the problem with going last, but not necessarily. So let's see what I can make of this time I have here. I have 4 points I want to make. We'll see if I get to all 4. I'll Joe, give me some waving or something over there to let me know where I am. But I actually want to start with 2 quotes. One is by Nancy Campbell, who wrote a book called Using Women. And using women were women on drugs, and then the way women on drugs were seen and perceived. And she says, material factors are not so threatening without the governing mentalities that frame their meaning. So I want us to hold on to that material factors are not so threatening without the governing mentalities that frame their meaning. And this really kind of gets to a point that Congressman Cleaver raised about ideologues. And what does that mean when there's no room to kind of shift and morph and be flexible? And what does that mean when it's shaping the kinds of ways that you see people, right? I'm going to go off script, but here we go. One of the things that was really powerful and ugly for me was around the Personal Responsibility Act when that was being debated in the 1990s. And women who were using public assistance, who were using what was then known as welfare, in Congress were called alligators and wolves. They were considered predators. So if you think of people as predators, as alligators and wolves, what kind of policy would you come up with in that instance? Right, so if we just think about that as leaders, as potential leaders, as the ways that we frame our ideas, the kind of education we have or don't have, the ways we learn about issues or don't learn about issues, what kind of facts we can actually provide ourselves to actually give ourselves a much more deeper understanding of the issues, and I think that's a really important thing. That's one quote. The other quote is from Richard Wright. And Richard Wright said, "My dear, I do not deal in happiness, I deal in meaning." And I think that's very profound. So let me tell you what my 4 points are. When he says, I don't deal in happiness, I deal in meaning, there's sometimes we don't always get the lovely, glowing, romantic message that we want to get. Sometimes what we have to deal with is very ugly and painful and traumatic. But that's part of the work of fighting social injustice and understanding the systemic conditions related around racism and gender and heterosexism and economic injustice. We have to deal with that and then figure out, how do we move forward? How do we step forward? What are the things that we can put into place through education, through learning, through stories, through conversation, through dialogue, through more conversation, through more conversation, through more conversation. Maybe sometimes there's a little argument and more conversation, so that we can move forward. We're trying to figure out what are the solutions that we're going to come up with collectively and through our own individual resistance. The 4 points I wanted to raise are legacy and education is one. What is our legacy as we think about our own educational moment? So my guests from East Cleveland, all the students from East Cleveland, can y'all just stand up? Can all the students stand up? Can all the students stand up? Anybody who's a student in this room. So the question is, what is your legacy? What is your legacy? As future, oh, you don't have to stand up the whole time, babies. As future community leaders, what is your legacy? Because that's how I view you all, as future community leaders. What is it you will do? What is the passion that will drive you? This is something I call him MC. Mark Chupp just talked about. What is the passion that will drive you? What is it that's going to move you? What's going to motivate you to actually act? And what kind of education will you help provide for yourselves, in addition to claiming while you're in school by those who are providing it for you to actually educate yourselves? How do you understand the imperatives, the context, the issues, and the struggles? How many students even knew about the history of the Congressional Black Caucus? How many students even knew that many of the folks in the Congressional Black Caucus came out of a civil rights struggle? How many of the folks even knew that one of the founding members of the Congressional Black Caucus, Shirley Chisholm, was the first African-American woman to run for president? How many folks even knew there was an iteration of the Congressional Black Caucus before 1971, from 1969 to 1971? So what and how are you going to educate yourself? And what are the models that you're going to use to think about your own roles as individuals, to think about the ways that you can affect policy, to think about social action and collective struggle? How is it you're going to help yourself be in the place to be ready to be social change agents? 2, right? Who are community leaders? How do we even define that term? And we're definitely not going to have time to define it necessarily fully here, maybe in conversation, but how do we define it? We even have to question that. Who are community leaders? Are your community leaders your elected officials? Are your community leaders nonprofits? Are your community leaders different kinds of institutions? Are your community leaders those at the grassroots? Then who at the grassroots? Are your community leaders? Are they residents? Are they students? Are they parents? Are they, Ms. Willa Bennings, who no one maybe has never heard of, but is your neighbor who might have done something fantastic or not fantastic, but has a story about how she survived the struggle? Who are your community leaders, and how is that going to propel you forward? So the thing is, we need to think about how people on the ground need to learn, create spaces, find spaces to enhance their learning, and find spaces for voicing their concerns. Right? Finding those spaces where you can create and expand organizations, where you can create and expand processes to actually make your voices heard, that you actually see the connection between voicing and education and community mobilization and harnessing your own power and developing strategies and agendas that you will move forward. 3, the other thing I wanted to say is that in doing all of this, one needs to learn about local conditions. So if you're going to be a community leader, if you're going to see yourself as a community leader, you're going to be ready to actually do the work, you have to know what the local conditions are. And I think this is something that Congressman Cleaver really talked about, when it's not about being parochial. I'm not arguing about being parochial, that you have to just only understand what's in your backyard. But you have to understand the local conditions around you, how that connects to the national, how that connects to the global, how that'll help you do your work, and also so you can understand that you're not in it alone. right? Because sometimes some of us think that we can't lead because we have to be perfect or we don't have all the knowledge before we can make a decision. But that doesn't have to be the case. But you have to educate yourself and learn about the local conditions, the local politics, and the local context. 4, if it's not clear by now, I'm really focused on an intergenerational context, right? The reason I had all the young people stand up and then all the people who are students is because we're all life learners. We're all lifelong learners. And in order to be a community leader, in order to see yourself in that role as possible, we have to figure out how we support and grow social change agents. Here at the university, the Social Justice Institute, one of its main goals is to support and build social change agents by doing that through curriculum, through programs and events. We had a social justice, race, and profiling think tank where we had and we had folks from 10 years old all the way up to 80s in the same room talking about issues, right? And so it's about that exchange and it's about that dynamic of thinking about how these issues connect to you and how you become social change agents, no matter where you are in the age continuum, but particularly for our young people. So my charge to the young people and to lifelong learners, all of us as adults, is to think about what are your issues, and particularly for the new generation, and Lori Eiler has heard me say this many, many times before. What are your issues? What are the issues of today? How do they relate to the questions, the preponderance of questions, and the ugliness, and the pain, and the trauma, and the injustices that rule us today? Whether it's economic injustice, whether it's environmental injustice, whether it's we don't live in a post-racial society, so racism, whether it's heterosexism, differently abled issues. What are your issues? Right? And how will you bring them to fruition? How do you bring them into a space where there's a campaign, where you're convincing people and you make it relevant? How do you think about building alliances and relating that work in an authentic way where there's reciprocity and there's actual strategies and things are purposeful, right? And that it doesn't stop at ideology. It doesn't stop at just words and abstractions, but that you really see the kinds of conversations and dialogues and even some of the 1, 2, 3, 4 points that I'm mentioning as critical to the process of moving from learning and educating to reflecting to action to voicing. Right? So that's what I would say. Those are the components that I would put together in terms of thinking about a social justice framework and thinking about how do we mobilize and enact and harness the wealth of knowledge and expertise from our own particular situations to actually create alliances and campaigns that are issue-driven, that are for people and are about the work to get it done. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much, Professor Williams. Leadership is a challenge. Leadership is a responsibility. Leadership should be done responsibly, which we're not seeing very much of in Washington right now. It sounds like you've got to be able to do better than some of the people who are leading now. I would like to extend the schedule a bit and to have a few minutes for questions. If you have a question you would like to ask to the panel, please walk up to the microphone so that you can pose your question. I would also like to, at this point, which is when we were sort of supposed to be wrapping up, to particularly thank President Snyder for her support of this event and for all that this university has been able to do with her leadership. Thank you. So does anyone have a question they would like to pose? While you're thinking about if you do, I would like to pose one question for Congressman Cleaver. Would you rather go back to being mayor of Kansas City? And when you think about the opportunities, is mayor a better job?
Well, I ended up as the president of the National Conference of Black Mayors, and then I was on the executive committee of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I used to say to the members all the time that next to the presidency, mayors of major cities have the most significant responsibility in the country. And when I say that, I'm not saying it jokingly. When you are mayor, you stand on center stage of the municipal drama. the things that you deal with are things that matter. People are not concerned about NATO. They're not concerned about what the ambassador to Uganda said. They want to know if the trash is going to be picked up on Tuesday. They want to know if the stop sign that's down is going to be picked up, if the stoplight's going to be fixed, if the buses are going to run, if the response time is going to be greater. I mean, they're concerned about the issues that impact their lives on a daily basis. And I had the opportunity to serve as mayor for 8 years. They were fabulous years. I don't think I would want to go back and do that, not because it was not a great time, but I think, in all of our lives, we reach a point where what we did is what we did, and we move on to what we're going to do. Now, serving in a city is different. You don't have all of the pathological bickering, because in Cleveland there is no Republican way to fill a pothole. So there's no debate. There's a pothole. It has to be fixed, and the Democrats and the Republicans can both see the pothole, and they know that it needs to be fixed. In Washington, there's a pothole. So now we're going to have the Department of Transportation to study it. And then the EPA comes in after the study to see if there are any toxic ingredients in it. And so 6 years later, somebody introduces a bill to repair it.
Do you think the use of the Hispanic caucus and Black caucus violates the Civil Rights Act of '64?
Let me clarify. So you're saying that organizing to represent oneself on a basis that is related to race, you think would violate the Civil Rights Act?
Things that are race exclusive.
Yes. I'm glad you asked the question, because I'm asked that question a lot, and I hear it a lot on right-wing radio. We had a white caucus from 1865. And nobody was mad. Now, here's the problem. Here's the thing. Most people don't realize there's a Croatian caucus in Congress. Nobody's concerned about it. There is a women's caucus. There is a civility caucus, and all 7 of us meet whenever we get a chance. So I think that it is important to have caucuses. And let me just say to you what I've said on a radio interview. Maybe, and I hope, I'm not prayed for this, but I should, and you asking the question made me think about it. My prayer should be that my children and their children will see the Congressional Black Caucus as a social group that comes together out of a similar experience, because there would be no need for a Black Caucus. We have to have it today. You know why? If we didn't have the Black Caucus, the Pickford settlement of black farmers who had been systematically discriminated against by the Department of Agriculture year after year after year, where they held back federal funds that were supposed to go to Hispanic and black farmers. It was intentional. It went to the federal courts, and the federal courts, with no black people presiding, said this is discrimination, and ruled that the Department of Agriculture had to pay. We had a disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. Crack cocaine used by minorities and poor folk, powder cocaine by the movie stars, rich people. So you go to prison for crack cocaine, automatic sentence at one point, 15, 20 years, powder cocaine, you go on probation, and, you get to go to horse races and so forth. The professor just said we are not in a post-racial world. So if we're not in that world, then issues that relate to African Americans and Latinos must be addressed. And the people who are most anxious to address them are Latinos and African Americans.
This is why it's important, I think, to understand the history and the scaffolding of the contemporary issues. Because if you understand the context out of which some of these organizations come, or some of the efforts come, or some of the struggles that we still have come from, then you can understand and assess how the past has affected the present and where we are in the present and what still needs to be done and what still needs to be in place. And so the continual need for civil rights and for human dignity and human respect for African Americans, given the conditions that we face in this country, are still very much not only relevant, but prevalent and demanding of our attention and our desire to actually struggle against them. That means that while we are the ones who are most likely to fight for those rights and to continue to argue for the needs of our communities, it has to move beyond our communities in an authentic, understanding way, not one that's knee-jerk, not one that is not prepared to open the arms and to really understand the dynamics of people who are in pain, and also to see the commonalities across racial lines and across the other kinds of subject identity lines as well. So I think it's really important. Sometimes you can rally around, issues like if it's environmental justice, then people can tend to get on board with that more. But if it's something that's specifically focused on a group of people who have tended to be marginalized or oppressed, then the flags go up. And so we know just because of that, we're not in a post-racial society. And we know just because of that, those conversations need to be had. And we know just because of that, there are different levels of respect in terms of how we engage in our political and social discourse and interactions.
We will take one more question.
My name is Shaquille Tyson from Shaw High School, honor student in law. My question is for Congressman Cleaver II. What is your greatest achievement, or do you think you still have more to come?
What is your greatest achievement? Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. Obviously, if I conclude that I've already made my greatest achievement, then I need to leave. So I think there are a lot of physical things in my community that people would look at and say, boy, yeah, he rebuilt the historic 18th and Vine area where jazz got started with Count Basie from Kansas City and Charlie Yardbird Parker and so forth. And they point to a lot of other things. But what I think I had as the greatest achievement, I was mayor of Kansas City when Rodney King's decision was handed down, and race riots broke out all over the country. And we had a group assembling in Kansas City for a march into what's called the Country Club Plaza, which is a high-income shopping center. It's the world's first shopping center away from downtown. And these African Americans getting ready to march into the Country Club Plaza. And there's no question in my mind that was a formula for disaster. And people were going to get hurt and possibly killed because they were the last time we'd had a riot there, and after Martin Luther King was killed, they surrounded this area with tanks. So I received a phone call in my office in City Hall, and I was told what was going on. And my security guards put me in the car quickly. They sent out a helicopter to follow us from the air, and I met the crowd, and I was successful in getting them to turn around. Now, if you go and Google it, you can read all of the stories surrounding it. Now, nobody will ever say that was my greatest achievement but me. And the reason is you cannot, people don't like to measure what didn't happen. And so, but for me, what didn't happen helps me sleep at night.
We've been talking about political leadership today with a great political leader, Congressman Emanuel Cleaver II. And in talking about political leadership, we've actually identified something problematic. The notion that leadership means representing, but that leadership also can mean conflict. And some people are uneasy with that, but that doesn't mean you can't lead. And I think perhaps a concluding thought that would make sense would be actually from the ancient Rabbi Hillel, who said, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, who am I?" Thank you very much to all of you.